What's up guys, Lifting here. This is a video guide for my Poison Arrow Magic Find Scion. Before we begin, let me clarify what magic finding actually means in case you are new to the game. Magic finding is the process of using a character geared with increased item rarity and increased item quantity stats on gear to farm certain bosses or zones for the specific purpose of getting item drops. Basically, a magic find character will statistically find much more loot than a character that doesn't focus on this aspect of the game. In order to get high item rarity and quantity rolls on your gear, you will have to sacrifice other affixes on gear, and this generally means that builds that rely on a multitude of offensive or defensive stats will do poorly as magic find builds. Luckily, this is not the case for Poison Arrow, and because of that, Poison Arrow is a perfect candidate for anyone wanting to do some magic finding. And the reason for this is simply that in order to scale the damage from Poison Arrow, then you simply need to level up the skill gem, support it through a very cheap 2+ to skill gem levels bow, and through various but easily obtainable jewels. With this build you'll be able to efficiently farm bosses such as Vol, Dominus and up to level 74-75 maps, which is all you really need for a magic find build to be profitable. For defenses, this build utilizes the acrobatics keystone together with having a high amount of evasion and life. However, if one prefers, you can pick up iron reflexes and make the build armor focused instead. The build further utilizes 7 frenzy charges to significantly increase the damage and attack speed. Alright, so let me show you the skill gem setup we use for this character, and let's start with the most interesting one, the Poison Arrow setup. For Poison Arrow, I recommend the following. Poison Arrow, increased area of effect, concentrated effect, slower projectiles, and empower if you have a 5 link. For this type of build you really don't need a 6th link, but if you want you can add in added item rarity or pierce if you plan on using the unique quiver drill neck, but it's not really necessary. And the way this works is that concentrated effect will increase the damage but also reduce the size of your poison cloud, but with increased area of effect this is fairly easily countered. Slower projectiles will directly, through increased projectile damage, scale the damage of the poison cloud. Empower will give you a great damage boost by increasing the levels of the supported skill gems, but keep in mind that in order for an empower to work, then it needs to be at least level 2. So don't try to socket it in there if it's only level 1. And now to further increase your chances of getting that fat loot from bosses or rares, then I suggest the following setup. Flame Totem, increased item rarity, Culling Strike and Blood Magic. And the way this works is that every time you encounter a boss or a rare mob and want to increase the chance of the monster dropping something valuable, then as the monster is almost dead you summon your Flame Totem, which will cull the boss, thus instantly killing it if it's at 10% or lower HP and providing you with increased item rarity from that mob. This setup is a huge boost to your item rarity and should always be used when killing bosses, exiles or rare mobs. Next up, to apply your curse, increase your single target damage and generate your frenzy charges, this is what you need. Vulnerability, Blood Rage, increased duration, Vol Lightning Trap, multiple traps and Blood Magic. And it is important to note here that Vol Lightning Trap and multiple traps does not need to be linked with the other 4 skill gems. However, if you can do, it is of benefit. But let me explain how this setup works. Vulnerability will increase the damage over time effect of your poison cloud. Blood Rage will, whenever you kill a target, give you a 25% chance of generating a frenzy charge. Multiple traps together with Vol Lightning Trap will efficiently spread shocked ground, thus making the monsters take increased damage from your poison cloud. Increased duration increases the amount of uptime of both vulnerability, Blood Rage and the duration of the shocked ground laid by your Vol Lightning Trap. And obviously Blood Magic makes you able to fuel the cost of the skills through your life pool instead of your mana pool, which is good for 2 reasons. Number 1 is that when using Purity of Elements together with Grace, then you won't have much mana left to cast, and since curses cost a lot of mana to cast, then you'll quickly find yourself mana depleted when having to cast a curse and also using your Poison Arrow at the same time. Blood Magic prevents this. The other reason is that I suggest getting a Divination Distillate Flask later on in the game. This flask grants increased item rarity and quantity whenever it is in effect, but it is only in effect when you aren't on full HP and you actually can heal up with it. So when casting Vulnerability with Blood Magic, you will lose a small amount of life. This will give you room to activate the Divination Distillate Flask, thus granting you the bonus from the flask while it heals you. And I must admit that doing this feels a bit awkward in the beginning, but when you get used to it, it's no problem, and the benefit it provides is just absolutely awesome. But I'll talk more about this flask later on in the video. About Blood Rage, it's also important to understand that it comes with the downside of making you lose 4% of your maximum life per second as physical damage whenever activated. However, since we will be picking up some nice life regeneration nodes throughout the skill tree, you'll be able to completely negate this to the point where you will actually out-regen this degen effect. And as I said before, it's also important to note that Vol Lightning Trap and Multi-Traps does not need to be linked to the 4 other skill gems, even though it is nice to have it linked to increased duration. Having it linked with just Multi-Traps is enough, which means that if you just 4-link Vulnerability, Blood Rage, Increased Duration and Blood Magic, and then 2-link Vol Lightning Trap and Multi-Traps, then you should be fine. And now to improve the defenses of the build, I suggest running Grace together with Purity of Elements, Enduring Cry and Blink Arrow. Grace will greatly increase your evasion rating, thus making you harder to hit. Purity of Elements will serve to provide you with a big boost to all your elemental resistances, which is awesome for a Magic Find character, as this will make the gearing process much easier, thus allowing you to focus on getting more item rarity on your gear instead of resistances. Enduring Cry serves to provide you with endurance charges, and Blink Arrow works as a teleportation movement skill. It should be said here that if you can cap your resistances without the use of Purity of Elements, then I suggest adding in Arctic Armor as an alternative. Next up, to prevent heavy physical damage attacks from killing you and to help your Flame Golem uptime, I recommend that you link Cast when damage taken level 9 with Immortal Call level 11, Summon Flame Golem level 11, and Increased Duration, which can be leveled all the way up to max level. This setup will make it so that as long as you have your endurance charges up, then whenever you take a decent hit of damage, then the Cast when damage taken skill gem is going to proc and cast Immortal Call for you, thus making you immune to any physical damage for a few seconds and giving you time to get into a safer position. Additionally, it will also keep resummoning your Flame Golem so that you don't have to do this yourself. And the reason I suggest Flame Golem is that the buff it provides directly increases the damage of Poison Arrow. And in case you are new to the game and you are curious about where and how to obtain these skill gems, then check out the poe.wiki link that I have left in the description. It will show you where you can obtain all of the skill gems for each individual character. And so let me show you the skill tree and explain how I leveled this character. Keep in mind that the type of skill nodes that benefits this build is the ones that provide life and evasion to make you more tanky. Besides that, you also want some life regeneration and mana regeneration to be able to sustain Blood Rage and use Poison Arrow without running out of mana. And to increase your damage, things such as increased projectile, chaos, degen and area damage is worth picking up as well. A lot of these offensive stats can and should be obtained through jewels, as a lot of these skill nodes and notables simply aren't that efficient compared to what a jewel can provide. And as you can see, the full skill tree is 115 points. And now let me show you how I suggest you spend each skill point as you level up. We're gonna reset it here and we're gonna start here as the Scion. Your number one goal when starting out is to make leveling easier by grabbing some projectile damage, life and some mana regeneration. We're gonna do that by starting here, picking up the projectile damage, then heading down towards Sentinel for the increase to evasion rating and D10 to all elemental resistances. From Sentinel, we're gonna head down towards the Duelist tree, where we're gonna pick up Art of the Gladiator for the attack speed and the bonus of ignoring all movement penalties from armor. We don't care about accuracy because that doesn't really matter for Poison Arrow. We are interested in spreading the Poison Cloud, and that's gonna work even with low accuracy. From Art of the Gladiator, we're gonna pick up Fury Bolts down here. Remember that projectile damage will also increase the damage of your Flame Totem, and because I recommend Flame Totem to level with, this will make your leveling process faster and easier when we're picking up projectile damage here in the beginning. From Fury Bolts, I recommend that you pick up Mana Flows for the mana regeneration and extra mana that it provides. This will make leveling faster, and you will need Mana Flows to sustain your Poison Arrow later on in the game. After Mana Flows, I of course suggest picking up Bravery together with the remaining life point skill node here. This will provide you with a nice boost to your life and evasion rating. And your next goal from here is to grab some more evasion, some more mana regeneration and some more life, and we're gonna do that by heading back towards the Scion skill tree, pick up reflexes for the nice evasion boost, and then heading down towards Ballistic Mastery here for the 15% increased projectile damage, the projectile speed, and the 20+ to dexterity. From Ballistic Mastery, I suggest picking up Heart of the Oak for the life increase and the 1% of life regenerated per second. Remember, we need life regeneration in order to sustain Blood Rage. After Heart of the Oak, I also suggest picking up Primal Spirit, again to help sustain your Poison Arrow and to help with the mana requirements early on when leveling with Firestorm and Flame Totem. The next goal is to get some more life and some more projectile damage. Again, that's going to help with Flame Totem, and it's going to make you more tanky, obviously, by getting more life. We're going to do that by picking up the projectile damage nodes down here, then going into Golem's Blood and grabbing the last life node here as well. Golem's Blood is going to give you a nice 10% increased maximum life and 1.6 of life regenerated per second. Again, great for Blood Rage. From Golem's Blood, we're going to head back towards the Shadow Tree up here, and we're going to branch in this direction where we're going to pick up Quickness for the 5% increased movement speed. The physical damage doesn't really matter, but the movement speed is okay, and we need Quickness in order to branch into Sniper. That's going to give us projectile damage and projectile speed. From Sniper, we're going to head into Coordination for the attack speed bonus, and because it allows us to get into Blood Siphon, that's going to grant us that nice 12% increased maximum life, some life gained on kill, and strength that's going to help us with the gear requirements. And don't forget to pick up the last remaining life node here. After this, I also suggest picking up Revenge of the Hunted together with the last remaining skill points down here. And the reason we pick up these skill nodes is because of the bonuses to evasion rating and the increases to maximum life. At this point in time, you are probably using Poison Arrow, or at least considering transitioning into it very soon. And so to increase the damage of Poison Arrow, we're going to pick up the Frenzy Charges, we're going to pick up some more life regeneration, and we're going to go for Acrobatics to boost our defenses. In order to sustain our Frenzy Charges through Blood Rage, we're going to start by picking up the life regeneration. We're going to do that by moving towards the Scion wheel over here. We're going to pick up life in this direction and head into Shaper. Shaper is going to give us mana regeneration, which is great for Poison Arrow sustainability, and 1% of life regenerated per second, together with these skill nodes here that also grant 0.4 of life regenerated per second for each skill node, which is excellent for what we're trying to do. Keep in mind, the reason this is efficient as well is because it's near a jewel socket, which we'll be picking up later. From here on, we'll pick up the 3 extra Frenzy Charges. We're going to start with Frenetic, then we're going to head down towards the Duelist tree, pick up Savagery, and then we're going to move in this direction where we're going to branch down in this direction and pick up Fervor. After having picked up Fervor, you'll now be able to use 6 Frenzy Charges and 7 if you decide to help Kraden on Merciless difficulty as the Bandit quest reward. From Fervor, I also suggest picking up Acrobatics for that 30% chance to dodge attacks. But as I always say in my build guides, if you pick up Acrobatics, make sure that you are using primarily evasion gear before you do so. Otherwise, your armor and energy shield gear will become less efficient. From here on, we simply want some more damage and some more life. And we're going to do that by picking up Herbalism down here for a very nice 10% increased maximum to life, and the additional bonus of having increased life recovery from Flasks and increased Flask recovery speed. This is not to be underestimated, it actually provides a very nice bonus. From Herbalism, to get some more damage, I suggest heading back towards the top of the Shadow Tree here and then picking up Entropy. Entropy together with the 2 skill nodes here is going to give you a very nice increase to damage over time skill, which directly influences your Poison Cloud. From here on, we simply want to pick up jewel sockets where you can put in jewels that will directly increase your damage, and I'm going to show you later how these jewels needs to look like, which ones you need to get. And I suggest we start by picking up this jewel socket down here for 1 cost point, then heading down towards the Scion wheel here, picking up the next jewel socket for 1 cost point, then picking up the jewel socket here near the start area of the Scion, and the other jewel socket here near the Scion starting area. After this, I would suggest you pick up some more life, and the best way to do that is by picking up Blood Drinker here together with these 2 nice 6% increased maximum life skill nodes. Blood Drinker will also grant you that 8% and some physical damage, attack, leech, just life. But since you're not really dealing any physical damage, that's not gonna do much for you, but the life nodes are very efficient by itself. And to get even more life from here, I suggest you also pick up Constitution over here, for that flat 20 to maximum life and 14% increased maximum life. I also suggest picking up one last note here as well. And it should be said here that if you lack strength in the beginning of the game, when you level up, you can pick up these two skill notes and branch your way over towards Constitution early on if you feel like it. And the last thing I recommend doing in the skill tree from here is simply picking up the last remaining jewel sockets, some extra damage nodes, and the last life nodes. And the best way to do this is by heading over near acrobatics, picking up the projectile damage skill nodes here together with jewel socket. From here I suggest picking up the jewel near the fervor notable. After that, we're gonna head back towards Golem's Blood down here and pick up the other jewel socket together with the strength skill node. From here, I would recommend picking up some more life by picking up profane chemistry, and also because of the added bonus it provides of 30% increased life recovery from flasks. Then go for yet another jewel up here by Blood Drinker. We're gonna pick up the jewel socket just above. Then after this, I suggest picking up Method to the Madness for 22% increased chaos damage, together with the skill notes that also grant some chaos damage. And the reason we don't pick this up earlier is simply because that jewel sockets with increased chaos damage, projectile damage, degen damage, things like that are more efficient compared to the amount of skill points it costs to get that. So Method to the Madness is something you should pick up near the end of your build when you cannot insert more jewels to your skill tree. The last 3 points you're going to spend is down here by Ballistic Mastery, and it is the 3 projectile damage skill nodes. This leaves you with 115 points, a complete skill tree, and this was how I suggest you spend your skill points. And while leveling Poison Arrow right from the beginning of the game is possible, I really don't suggest doing it, as it is really slow and inefficient compared to what you can do besides. Instead, I recommend picking up a Flame Totem and a Firestorm skill gem, put these in a +1 levels of Fire skill gem, Scepter or Wand, and use these skills until you reach Cruel difficulty. And you may have to buy a Lapis Amulet from Nessa in Act 1 in order to get enough intelligence to use these skills in the beginning. When you reach Cruel, I suggest you buy a cheap Silver Branch bow on poe.trade and link it with your Poison Arrow setup, so concentrated effect, increased area effect, and slower projectiles. And from here on you can now start to use Poison Arrow as your main skill. At this point in time it will still be fairly slow, but it is manageable. When you reach level 50 to 55, I would advise you to buy a cheap white 5-link Grove bow with an item level of 64 or higher. I paid 2 Chaos Orbs for mine, they are really cheap, and what you need to do is that you need to transmute this white Grove bow to make it magical. Then after that, spend a few alteration orbs on it until you get 2+ to socketed bow gem levels. And I have done this 2 times now, and it didn't cost me more than 30 alteration orbs in total for both bows, as it is a very common stat to roll on these bows. The reason you want one that is of item level 64 or higher is because if you regal it, then you have the chance of getting the +1 to socketed skill gems, which will leave you with 3+ to skill gem levels bow, which is really valuable and powerful, but also really rare and very hard to get. But at least you have the chance of getting it if your bow is above item level 64. And when you get that 5-link Grove bow with 2+ to socketed bow gem levels, your damage should start to feel much better. And whenever you can get yourself that level 2 or higher leveled in power, I suggest doing that, as it greatly increases the damage of your Poison Arrow as well. Again, if you are in doubt of where or how to obtain these skill gems, then please check out the poe.wiki link that I have left in the description. Now the last thing we're going to talk about is what kind of affixes and stats you should aim for on your gear and jewels for your character to make your build as powerful as possible, while still aiming to have as much item rarity and quantity as possible. And I should of course mention that being elemental resistance capped is required for this build when you reach Merciless, but when you are resistance capped, these are the defensive stats in priority you need to focus on getting on your gear. Number 1 is life, and I suggest you try to aim for at least 70+ on each rare item, the more the better. Secondly, you want evasion. Thirdly, you should look for the stat called increased item rarity to increase your magic find capabilities. And it should be mentioned here that increased item quantity, at least if you're playing in new leagues, is not something you can get on rare items anymore. You can only get that on unique items, so there's no point in looking for it on rare items. Fourth and lastly, you should try to get some intelligence on your gear to help you level up your skill gems. And so to improve your damage, your offensive stat priority is as following. Number 1 is increased projectile, degen, chaos and area damage. All of these stats can be rolled on jewels. So what you need to do is to go to poe.trade and buy jewels with these specific stats. Try looking for jewels with, for instance, 10% increased area damage and 10% increased chaos damage, and then try to get a jewel with 10% increased projectile damage and 10% increased chaos damage, and so on and so on. And secondly, if possible, try to get a bit of attack speed on your gear whenever possible. It isn't that important, but having a fast attack animation makes the character feel much better to control. And for this build you should also get 2 hollowed or divine life flasks of staunching depending on which type you prefer, 1 ample jade flask of reflexes, and 2 ample quicksilver flasks of adrenaline to offset the movement penalties of some of the unique items. And with that said, let's talk about the unique items I recommend for this build. Keep in mind that none of these are required, but in order to get those really good item rarity and quantity rolls, then you will need to get these. If you cannot afford these at the current time, then simply use rare items with good rolls of item rarity on them. Again, please remember that if you're in the new leagues, you cannot get item quantity on rare items, so only look for item rarity. The first item I'm going to recommend is the Orsees gloves. These gloves are excellent for magic finding as they provide you a 40 to 50% increased item rarity together with 15 to all elemental resistances, which is awesome as it makes gearing easier. And apparently the gloves are so heavy that they also reduce your movement speed by 5%, but that is why I suggest having 2 quicksilver flasks. The next item I'm going to recommend is Goldworm. These boots provide you with a much needed 14 to 20% increased item quantity together with a nice 60% increased mana regeneration bonus and 40 to 50% increased fire resistances. All very useful stats for this type of build. To further increase your item quantity stats, I would also recommend getting the very cheap Perandus Blazon belt or Blazon belt, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. This belt will give you 6 to 8% increased item quantity, and while that may not seem like much, it actually does make quite a difference. The belt also comes with the added benefit of granting 20 to 30 to all attributes and some fire resistance. I suggest buying this belt early on in the game as the additional attributes will make it easier to level. For yet another great boost to your item rarity, I highly recommend the Endvarious Gold Ring. Not only does this ring have the implicit rarity roll, but it also grants you an additional whopping 50 to 70% increased item rarity and a small amount of dexterity, but it comes with the downside of reducing your elemental resistances by 20%. However, this is fairly easy to circumvent, so don't worry about that. After all, you are using Purity of Elements, and your Orsees also provides 15 to all elemental resistances. And I should mention that if you can't get yourself a well-rolled Ventur's Gamble ring, then that would obviously be absolutely fantastic, as it both provides item rarity, quantity, resistances, life and so on. However, getting one with good rolls will be very expensive and probably not worth the cost in the long run. And now for the last unique recommendation. One of the biggest contributors to quantity and rarity can be obtained through the usage of the Divination Distillate Flask that I mentioned earlier. When used correctly, this flask will give you anywhere from 40 to 60% increased item rarity, 12 to 18% increased item quantity, and 6% to maximum elemental resistances. If you manage to obtain one of these flasks, I suggest swapping it out with one of your quicksilver flasks. If you manage to obtain all of these unique items together with well-rolled rarity, rare items, and your calling totem, then you can expect to reach about 280 to 320% increased item rarity together with 30 to 40% increased item quantity, all depending on the rolls of your items. And having such high rolls of item rarity and quantity will grant you a ton of extra rare items together with lots of additional unique items. But again, keep in mind that RNG is RNG. It does not necessarily mean that you'll be getting all the good items. And it should be mentioned that getting some of these unique magic find items can be expensive. And as I said a few minutes ago, none of these are mandatory requirements for the build, but if you want the highest rolls, then you will eventually need these unique items. Lastly, for the Bandit quest rewards, you should help Oak on normal difficulty for the extra HP, on Cruel you should kill them all for the +1 to skill points, and on Merciless you should help Kratin for the +1 to maximum frenzy charges. And that's it guys, remember if you have any questions, then the best way to contact me is to join me at my Twitch live stream. The link is below in the description, otherwise feel free to ask your questions below in the comments or by going to my forum post on the Path of Exile forums. I will do my best to answer any questions that haven't already been answered in this video. Remember to subscribe for more Path of Exile content. Thank you for watching, and bros, do you even nerd?